let us start with the breaking news we got at 8 o'clock this morning that the pub operator Mitchells and Butlers is going to be cutting 1,300 jobs. As we face the announcement of the tier system again this morning after lockdown ends next week, we know that the hospitality sector has been so badly hit. What hope is there for people in hospitality right now as we head towards Christmas?
Well, Susanna, jobs have been my #1 priority throughout this crisis. Sadly, 750,000 people have already lost their job, but that is forecast to rise in the coming months, which is why I talked about some of the hardship that lies ahead. But we are relentlessly focused on trying to protect and support as many jobs as possible with the various interventions that we've put in place. And I'm glad that yesterday the Office for Budget Responsibility joined with others like the Bank of England and the IMF in saying that our economic interventions had protected people's jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs, and meant that unemployment will be lower than it otherwise would have been. And to those in the hospitality sector, they have been the most impacted by everything that's going on. That's why we've tried to put in place lots of support for that industry with initiatives over the summer, business rates, holidays, VAT cuts, and now cash grants every month that they're facing restrictions and the ability to furlough their employers. I know it's difficult, and I appreciate and applaud everything these businesses are doing to get through a difficult time.
Are you in a big argument with the Health Secretary over the tiers? Because we know that if the big cities, for instance, go back into Tier 3, the hospitality sector is going to endure more pain.
You're right, these restrictions do have an impact on businesses, particularly in hospitality, which is why we've extended the furlough scheme all the way through the winter. So that means that we can help businesses with their staff costs, and they also receive a cash grant every month that they're in these areas, either £3,000 a month up to if they're closed, and up to £2,100 a month if they're on Tier 2 but open. I think those payments will make a big difference to helping them get through, but it is going to be difficult, and I appreciate that. But we're doing everything we can to suppress the virus whilst allowing as much economic activity to happen as possible.
There were eye-watering amounts of money that you announced yesterday, and you said that the economic emergency has only just begun. But why are you putting the burden on some of the poorest? And I'm talking about foreign aid and the cut in the foreign aid budget. It might look like an easy hit, and we've done a Twitter poll on it. They think that that money should be spent back home. But it was a manifesto commitment by your own party on which you were elected that you would maintain that foreign aid contribution. And businesses say that it stimulates economic activity abroad, and charities are worried about the cost.
Well, first thing I'd say is, there's definitely, I wouldn't describe it as an easy hit. That's not how I approached the decision. It was a very difficult decision. It was one of the tough choices we had to make, and I had to make, in order to make sure that I could keep investing in the priorities that the British people have: stronger public services, more money for the NHS, for schools, for safer communities and more police, and to deliver the step change in infrastructure investment that will transform our country. And in order to do all of that, this was one of the difficult decisions we had to make. You talked about the context we're in, with record levels of borrowing and debt, the economic emergency, and in that context, I didn't think we could justify sticking rigidly to the 0.7% target, but we will still spend £10 billion on foreign aid next year. That's roughly equivalent to 0.5%. 0.5% makes us still one of the most generous large countries anywhere in the world, the second in the G7 group of large countries. So I think everybody watching should feel very proud about the role we're playing in the world.
So the Archbishop of Canterbury is wrong in his criticism. It was wrong that Baroness Sugg, the Foreign Office Minister, resigned because she couldn't back this cut. The former Prime Minister, David Cameron, describing it as a sad moment, is wrong about this. The former International Development Secretary, Andrew Mitchell, saying this will contribute to 100,000 deaths.
Needless deaths of children. Do you feel the moral dilemma there, Chancellor, as a father yourself?
Yeah, Of course, as I said, it's a difficult decision. It's a tough choice. But that said, in the context of the economic situation, I think it's right to prioritise on public services and protecting people's jobs in the midst of an economic crisis, but also remaining, as I said, the second most generous large country in the world, is at 0.5%, which is what the equivalent of £10 billion next year is. We are still one of the largest donors to almost every multilateral organisation. We're currently leading in getting vaccines out to the world's poorest countries. That's probably the most important thing we could do right now to help, as you said, children and those living in poverty elsewhere. We want to make sure that they all have access to a coronavirus vaccine. There's an international body called COVAX, which is getting those vaccines. We are the largest donor to that, so people should feel very good about the contribution we're making.
And I think, you know, as you probably know, in terms of public opinion, it's probably quite a popular move, but it is quite a remarkable list of people who have been extremely critical of it. The other thing that people are critical of is the fact that you are freezing public sector pay, and that is a cost being paid by some of those who worked the hardest during the pandemic, teachers, police officers, other public sector workers. They have already endured a decade of austerity. This is a return to that, is it not?
Well, I think this is important, so let me explain how I've come to this, as there's another one of the difficult decisions we've had to make. So coming into this crisis, there was already a disparity between public and private sector wages, which people will be aware about. That disparity has been exacerbated over the past 6 months, where we've seen private sector wages fall by about 1%, and we've seen public sector wages rise by about 4%. People in the private sector have lost their jobs, as you started talking to me about. They've been furloughed, their hours are being cut, their wages are being cut. So in order to ensure fairness and in order to protect jobs in the public sector, I couldn't justify an across-the-board pay increase in public sector pay. We've taken a more targeted approach, which means those working in the NHS, nurses, will receive a pay rise next year. For everyone else, pay rises will be paused, but we want to make sure we try and do what we can for those on lower incomes. So if you're in the public sector and you earn less than £24,000, which is the UK median basic salary, if you earn less than that, you will receive a pay rise, £250. Taken together, that means a majority of people in the public sector will see their wages increase next year, and I think that is a reasonable, fair and proportionate approach given the situation.
So you are very conscious of the private sector and people working in the private sector. I just want to bring your attention to a tweet that you put out that has been sent to Susanna and I in the programme numerous times over the last 24 hours when people realised you were coming on. And it was a tweet that says, "You have not been forgotten. We will not leave you behind. We're all in this together." And you went on to list all the business support schemes there were for various people in the various forms of employment. Unfortunately, that's not true, is it? Because there are 2.9 million people, nearly 9% of the workforce, that are currently excluded or forgotten about from all of these schemes. For one reason or another, they cannot get access to some of those schemes that you have put into place. What do you say to those members of the excluded, those self-employed people that can't get access, or the people that run their own small limited businesses that for the last 8 or 9 months have received not a penny in support from the government?
So I don't think that 3 million number is right, and you've used it, but that number includes 1.5 million people who do not qualify for the self-employed scheme because they are not majority self-employed. They make the majority of their income from other forms being employed, and therefore they would be eligible to be furloughed. Now, when we designed that scheme, remember, we're sending grants out to people without knowing what their situation is. That's why it's difficult to do this. All of the bodies that I spoke with at the time that we designed that scheme supported the principle that support should be targeted on those who made the vast majority of their earning from self-employment, and we set the threshold actually just at a majority. Many of those people said it would be reasonable to set it even higher at 60% or 2/3. So, and that income, just so we're clear, that for those 1.5 million people who are in your 2.9, the average amount of self-employment income they make is £2,000 or £3,000. So at that level, even if they haven't received a grant, universal credit would be there for them. They'd still be able to benefit from things like our mortgage holidays if they have a mortgage, if they need help paying their rents, something called local housing allowance. We've increased that by almost £1 billion this year. So there's a lot of different things out there.
Undoubtedly, this is a very, very complicated situation. But we are being inundated, as I'm sure you are as well, by the excluded and those people that feel like they're forgotten, because they are falling through the gaps. Because for whatever reason, and whether you dispute how many people there are involved, whether it's 2.9 million or whether it's the 1.5, like you say, these are taxpayers that had very viable businesses and that were self-employed and doing everything they possibly could to try and maintain a business and employ people that suddenly can't get the support. Will you agree to at least meet representatives from Excluded or from Forgotten Limited in order to understand more clearly what it is that they are struggling with? Because at the moment, it is apparent from the people that are contacting us that they are absolutely devastated by the situation and they just can't get the support. These are upstanding people that are very self-motivated. They are self-starters. They have small, limited companies, and they just haven't got the support they need to try and maintain their business and support the economy.
So the numbers yesterday will outline just the scale of the support that we've put in place in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Now, everyone's going to be in a different circumstance. It's very hard for me. We've already spoken a lot to their team, and I've been back and forth. But I would say something. Yesterday, we had a spending review where we announced 15-year increases in investment in day-to-day public services. So everybody, regardless of their employment situation, I think benefits from strong public services. So whether it's more investment in the NHS, whether it's more investment in schools, whether it's more investment in skills, whether it's more investment in policing and safer communities, these are public services that benefit everybody. That was what yesterday was about.
But if you
it was
can't
making
pay
sure
your bills, what the investment that you've done in your local hospital and schools is not going to help you pay them. I just want to ask one last question, Chancellor, because I know that we have to let you go. Yeah. Universal credit. There has been a £20 weekly uplift. It's hugely significant. You haven't promised to to maintain it, beyond spring next year. It could be devastating for people if you didn't maintain it. Can you pledge to do that at this stage?
What we did at the beginning of this crisis was put in place lots of different support to help people. That was one of the elements of that set of interventions. It obviously has made a difference this year, but it lasts all the way through to next spring, as you said, which means we don't need to make a decision on it now. And in fact, given the economic uncertainty, it wouldn't be right to make a decision on it now. It's better to see where we are when we get through the winter period. Let's see where we are with the economy, our recovery, where we are with restrictions, and decide then what the best way to support people is. But in the meantime, next year, what we've said is we'll maintain the £1 billion uplift in local housing allowance, which helps people with their bills. 1 million people are benefiting from that. And we've also put aside £670 million, which will help 3.5 million households pay their council tax bills. So those are the things that we've put in place already to start helping people next year. But given the significance of this temporary uplift for this year, I think it's better to see where we are after we get through the winter. But look, as we have done throughout this crisis, and I think we've demonstrated that, we always are making sure that we can protect the most vulnerable in our society and try and help them, most crucially, get into work and good work. That's the best way for people to build a sustainable future for themselves.